And we have an email from Martha, and she's asking, could we talk about the difference in salts? Kosher, fleur de sel, Himalayan, sea salt, etc. Can they be used whenever a recipe calls for salt? Okay, so there are lots of people who are salt experts, and what really matters to them is like the mineral composition of those salts and what other minerals are involved in those salts. It depends on the water they're from or where the salt comes from, and they have a specific flavor and all that stuff. And I think that stuff is super interesting. I'm not an expert, and I think in general, that's kind of not what the question is. Because it sounds like if the question is, can all these salts be used when you call for salt in food? I think the bigger thing is, what does the salt look like? And by that I don't mean color, I mean the crystals, the shape. So if you take some table salt, like regular old, table salt, pour it into a little teaspoon and look at it. It'll be tiny, tiny, tiny. The crystals are super tiny. And if you take something like a kosher salt, pour that in a teaspoon, and they'll be like bigger flakes. Or a fleur de sel will certainly be really chunky and kind of clumpy. And there's a Malden salt that's beautiful flat crystals. And basically what I'm getting at is those different shapes will sit differently in the spoon, which means there will be more or less air in the spoon, which means 1 teaspoon of table salt is actually a different amount of salt than a teaspoon of kosher salt or a teaspoon of fleur de sel or something else. So if you're using them for cooking and you're following a recipe and you're using a volume measurement, that's where you have to be really careful, and you have to find out what kind of salt they're actually calling for in the recipe. Because if they're calling for kosher salt, which is much lighter, and there's literally less salt in a teaspoon, and you use table salt, then you're going to end up with a lot saltier food than the recipe intended. You know what I mean? So that's really the big difference for day-to-day cooking purposes. It's really that salt shape. And a lot of chefs love kosher salt, and a lot of chefs in particular love a brand called Diamond Crystal Kosher Salt because I think they're just used to using it, and they're used to knowing how much salt 1 pinch actually gets you. Like they know how much saltier it gets with each pinch. So it's really just a matter of muscle memory and what you're comfortable with. And certainly the really big flaky salts, the big crunchy salts too, the special thing with those is they have that crunch. And finishing dishes with those is special because it adds that extra bit of texture and a little pop of saltiness as you're eating, as opposed to an overall seasoning effect. So I hope that helps. And always, always, always call us. Leave us a voicemail, 1-800-537-5252.